The morning mist hung thick over Portsmouth Harbor as hundreds of workers hurried along the wooden docks. The year was 1588, and England was preparing for the greatest naval battle in its history. But this wasn't just any ordinary morning at the shipyard. Today, something special was happening that would soon catch the attention of the entire kingdom. At the far end of the harbor, past the smaller fishing boats and merchant vessels, stood the most magnificent ship anyone had ever seen. The Sovereign rose from the water like a floating castle, its 3 towering masts reaching toward the gray English sky. Workers swarmed over every inch of the vessel, putting the final touches on what many were calling the most advanced warship ever built. The ship's massive hull gleamed with fresh black paint, while golden decorations sparkled along its sides. But what really made people stop and stare were the rows of bronze cannons poking out from specially designed gun ports. These weren't ordinary iron cannons like other ships carried. These were something completely new, cast from bronze, using a secret method that made them stronger and more accurate than anything the Spanish had ever seen. Inside the ship's belly, carpenters hammered away at reinforced wooden beams. They weren't using regular oak like most ships. This vessel was built with specially treated timber that had been soaking in salt water for months to make it harder and more resistant to cannon fire. Every plank, every beam, every joint had been crafted with care that bordered on obsession. Captain Thomas Whitmore stood on the dock, watching his future command take shape. He was a man in his 40s with graying hair and hands scarred from years of rope work and sword fighting. His weathered face told the story of countless battles on distant seas, but even he had never seen anything quite like this ship. The Sovereign wasn't just big, it was smart. Every design choice had been made with one goal in mind: to sink enemy ships before they could get close enough to fight back. Whitmore walked slowly around the vessel, inspecting every detail with the eye of someone who knew that his life and the lives of 400 men would soon depend on this floating fortress. He paused at the gun deck, where master gunners were carefully positioning the bronze cannons. Each cannon was a work of art, decorated with intricate patterns and the royal coat of arms. But these weren't just for show. These cannons could fire heavier balls farther and more accurately than anything in the Spanish fleet. The workers knew they were building something special. Old Henry, the master shipwright who had been building vessels for 30 years, kept shaking his head in amazement. He had worked on ships for kings and merchants, but nothing like this. The Sovereign incorporated design ideas that seemed to come from the future. The hull shape was revolutionary, cutting through water with less resistance. The sail configuration allowed for better speed and maneuverability. Even the placement of the gun ports had been calculated to give maximum firepower. While maintaining the ship's balance, word of the remarkable warship had spread throughout Portsmouth and beyond. People came from neighboring towns just to get a glimpse of the vessel that everyone was talking about. Children pressed their faces against the harbor fence, watching in wonder as the great ship took its final form. Merchants whispered excitedly about the bronze cannons, while sailors from other ships gathered to discuss the revolutionary design features they had never seen before. The excitement reached its peak when a golden carriage rolled through the town streets toward the harbor. Queen Elizabeth herself had come to inspect her navy's newest and most powerful weapon. The crowd parted respectfully as the Queen, dressed in her finest robes and accompanied by her court, made her way to the docks. Her keen eyes took in every detail of the Sovereign, from its towering mast to its gleaming cannons. Standing before the magnificent vessel, Queen Elizabeth raised her voice so that everyone gathered could hear her words. She declared the ship to be the sword that would cut through Spanish pride and protect England's shores. Her words sent a thrill through the crowd and filled every worker with pride. They weren't just building a ship, they were crafting England's future. Captain Whitmore felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders as he received his official commission from the Queen herself. The parchment in his hands represented more than just a command, it was a trust. The fate of England might well rest on how he and his crew handled this incredible vessel in the coming battle against the Spanish Armada. As the Queen's carriage disappeared back into town, the pace of work intensified. Every man knew that time was running short. Spanish ships were already gathering across the Channel, preparing for their own invasion of England. The sovereign needed to be ready, and soon the ship's crew began arriving over the following days. 400 of England's finest sailors, gunners, and marines reported for duty. Many had heard stories about the revolutionary warship and were eager to serve aboard her. Others came with nervous excitement, knowing that they would soon face the most powerful navy in the world. The men who would sail on the Sovereign came from all walks of life. There were grizzled veterans who had fought pirates in the Caribbean, young sailors on their first major voyage, skilled gunners who could hit a target at incredible distances, and marines trained in close combat. Despite their different backgrounds, they all shared one thing: they believed in their ship and their captain. As supplies were loaded and final preparations made, everyone could feel the tension building. The Spanish Armada was getting closer each day, and soon the Sovereign would have to prove that all the innovative design work and careful construction had been worth it. The ship represented years of planning, months of building, and the hopes of an entire nation. The bronze cannons gleamed in the afternoon sun as gunners practiced their loading procedures. The specially designed gun ports opened and closed smoothly, allowing for faster firing than any ship in the world. Below deck, the reinforced hull creaked gently as waves lapped against the revolutionary design that promised to keep the ship stable even in rough seas. Captain Whitmore gathered his officers for their final briefing before setting sail. The men who stood before him represented the best naval minds in England. They had studied the ship's capabilities, learned its strengths, and prepared for every possible scenario they might face in battle. The Sovereign wasn't just a ship, it was a floating example of English innovation and determination. As evening fell over Portsmouth Harbor, lanterns were lit throughout the Sovereign. The great ship glowed like a beacon of hope in the gathering darkness. Tomorrow she would sail out to meet the Spanish fleet, carrying with her the dreams of a nation and the most advanced naval technology the world had ever seen. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change the course of history. The morning sun broke through the clouds as HMS Sovereign cut through the choppy waters of the English Channel. Captain Whitmore stood on the quarterdeck, his spyglass trained on the horizon where dark shapes were beginning to appear. The Spanish Armada had finally arrived, and it was even more massive than anyone had imagined. Word had reached the English fleet that over 100 Spanish ships were approaching. These weren't just warships, but floating fortresses carrying thousands of soldiers, cannons, and supplies for the planned invasion of England. The sight would have terrified most sailors, but the crew of the Sovereign felt different. They had complete faith in their revolutionary ship and their experienced captain, young William, barely 18 and serving as a powder monkey, felt his heart racing as he carried gunpowder cartridges to the cannons. This was his first real battle, and he couldn't help but feel both scared and excited. The older sailors around him moved with calm confidence, checking their weapons and preparing for the fight they all knew was coming. Their steady behavior helped calm his nerves. The gunners on the Sovereign were particularly eager for battle. They had spent weeks training with the ship's bronze cannons and knew exactly what these weapons could do, unlike the heavy iron cannons. On other ships, these bronze beauties could fire faster, hit harder, and reach targets much farther away. Master Gunner Roberts, a stocky man with powder burns on his hands from years of experience, walked among his crew giving final instructions. As the Spanish ships grew larger on the horizon, Captain Whitmore called his officers together. The plan was simple but dangerous. The Sovereign would lead the English attack, using its superior firepower to break through the Spanish formation. The ship's revolutionary design would allow it to move faster and turn quicker than the heavy Spanish galleons, giving it a crucial advantage in the coming battle. The first Spanish ship came within range just after noon. It was a massive galleon, 3 times the size of most English vessels, with towering wooden walls bristling with cannons. But Captain Whitmore had studied these ships and knew their weakness. They were built for carrying soldiers and supplies, Not for quick maneuvering in naval combat, Whitmore gave the order to attack, and the Sovereign sprang into action like a hunting wolf. The ship's innovative hull design allowed it to slice through the water at incredible speed, closing the distance to the Spanish fleet faster than anyone thought possible. The crew worked together like a well-oiled machine, each man knowing exactly what to do. The bronze cannons roared to life, sending iron balls crashing into the Spanish ship's wooden hull. The sound was deafening and smoke filled the air around the Sovereign, but these weren't random shots. The English gunners aimed carefully at the enemy ship's waterline, knowing that holes below the surface would sink the vessel quickly. The Spanish ship tried to return fire, but its heavy cannons couldn't turn fast enough to track the nimble Sovereign. Captain Whitmore used his ship's superior speed to stay just out of range of the enemy guns, while his own bronze cannons continued their devastating attack. Within minutes, the Spanish galleon was listing badly, water pouring through multiple holes in its hull. Seeing their comrade in trouble, 2 more Spanish ships moved to help. But this played right into Whitmore's strategy. The Sovereign's gun ports had been designed to allow rapid reloading, and the crew could fire their cannons twice as fast as any Spanish ship. As the enemy vessels approached, they were met with a continuous barrage of cannon fire that tore through their rigging and smashed their hulls. The battle raged for hours as more Spanish ships joined the fight. The Sovereign seemed to be everywhere, at once appearing from behind smoke clouds to unleash devastating broadsides before disappearing again. The ship's revolutionary design allowed it to turn and maneuver in ways that amazed both friend and foe. Young William found himself running back and forth between the powder magazine and the gun deck, his arms aching from carrying heavy cartridges. Despite his exhaustion, he felt proud to be part of this incredible crew. The men around him worked with determination and skill that he had never seen before. Even as enemy cannonballs whistled overhead, they remained focused on their tasks, but the Spanish weren't giving up easily. Admiral Medina Sidonia, commanding the Armada, recognized that the Sovereign was the key to English resistance. He ordered 5 of his largest ships to concentrate their fire on the revolutionary warship. The English vessel suddenly found itself surrounded by enemies, cannonballs crashing into its hull from multiple directions. Captain Whitmore realized the danger his ship was in, but he also saw an opportunity. If he could break through the Spanish formation at just the right moment, the rest of the English fleet could follow and scatter the enemy ships. It was risky, but it might win the entire battle. The Sovereign's bronze cannons thundered again and again as the ship fought its way through the Spanish formation. The crew worked desperately to keep the guns firing while carpenters below deck hammered wooden plugs into holes where enemy shots had penetrated the hull. The reinforced oak construction that had taken months to perfect was now proving its worth under the most extreme conditions. Just when victory seemed within reach, disaster struck. A Spanish cannonball, larger than any the English had seen before, crashed through the Sovereign's side and penetrated deep into the ship. The iron sphere smashed through wooden beams and continued downward until it reached the powder magazine where the ship's gunpowder was stored. The explosion that followed shook the entire battle. A massive ball of fire erupted from the Sovereign's belly, sending debris flying in all directions. The blast was so powerful that Spanish and English sailors alike stopped fighting to stare in shock. The pride of the English fleet, the most advanced warship ever built, was suddenly in mortal danger. Captain Whitmore felt the deck lurch beneath his feet as the ship began to list dangerously to one side. Water was pouring in through the massive hole created by the explosion, and he could see that the damage was too severe to repair. The innovative design that had made the Sovereign so powerful couldn't save her from this catastrophic hit. With a heavy heart, Whitmore gave the order that no captain ever wants to give. The crew would have to abandon ship. The men who had fought so bravely, who had believed so completely in their revolutionary vessel, now had to watch as their floating fortress began to sink beneath the waves. The evacuation was orderly but heartbreaking. Young William helped carry wounded sailors to the lifeboats, tears streaming down his face as he realized what was happening. The ship that had seemed invincible just hours before was now slipping beneath the surface of the English Channel, taking with it not just bronze cannons and innovative design features, but also secret documents and tactical plans that would have changed naval warfare forever. As the last lifeboat pulled away from the sinking Sovereign, Captain Whitmore took one final look at his command. The revolutionary warship that had fought so magnificently was disappearing into the deep, carrying its secrets to a watery grave that would hide them for centuries to come. The waters of the English Channel kept their secret for nearly 300 years after. Sovereign disappeared beneath the waves, but the legend of the lost warship never truly died. Sailors passing through the area sometimes reported strange sounds echoing from below, while fishermen occasionally pulled up pieces of bronze in their nets that seemed far too old and well-crafted to come from any ordinary shipwreck. In 1847, Lord Pemberton, a wealthy Victorian gentleman with a passion for history and adventure, became obsessed with finding the legendary warship. He had read every account of the battle against the Spanish Armada and was convinced that the Sovereign's revolutionary design held secrets that could advance British naval power. Using his family fortune, he hired a team of deep-sea divers and equipped them with the most advanced underwater equipment available at the time. The search was dangerous and difficult. Victorian diving equipment was crude and unreliable, consisting of heavy metal helmets connected to surface air pumps by long rubber hoses. Divers could only stay underwater for short periods, and the murky waters of the channel made visibility almost impossible. Week after week, Pemberton's team dragged primitive metal detectors across the seafloor, finding nothing but rocks, sand, and the occasional piece of modern shipwreck. One of Pemberton's divers, a tough Scotsman named MacLeod, nearly lost his life when his air hose became tangled in underwater debris. He was pulled to the surface unconscious and took days to recover. Despite the dangers, the team continued their search, driven by their employer's unwavering belief that the Sovereign was down there somewhere, waiting to be discovered. After 2 years of searching and spending nearly his entire fortune, Lord Pemberton was forced to give up. His final diary entry about the expedition was filled with frustration and disappointment. He wrote that he was certain the ship existed, but the technology simply wasn't advanced enough to find it. The Sovereign would have to wait for another generation of treasure hunters. The legend surfaced again during the dark days of World War II. German U-boat commander Klaus Weber was patrolling the English Channel in 1943 when his sonar operator reported an unusual contact on the seafloor. The reading showed a large object with a distinct ship-like shape, but it was far too old to be from the current war. Weber was curious, but with British destroyers hunting his submarine, he couldn't afford to investigate. Weber made a note in his patrol log about the mysterious sonar contact, describing it as a large vessel resting in what appeared to be an underwater canyon. Years later, after the war ended, he tried to interest British and German maritime archaeologists in his discovery, but post-war Europe had more pressing concerns than searching for old shipwrecks. The coordinates Weber had carefully recorded were filed away and forgotten. In the 1960s, advances in underwater technology sparked new interest in deep-sea exploration. Jacques Cousteau's underwater documentaries had captured the world's imagination, and suddenly everyone wanted to explore the ocean's mysteries. A group of British marine archaeologists, led by Professor Charles Henley, decided to search for the lost Sovereign using new scuba diving equipment and improved sonar systems. Henley's team was better equipped than any previous expedition. They had underwater cameras, powerful metal detectors, and diving suits that allowed them to work underwater for hours instead of minutes. The professor had studied all the historical accounts and was convinced he knew the general area where the ship had sunk. His calculations showed that the Sovereign should be somewhere in a triangle of water between Dover and Calais. The 1960s search lasted 3 summers and covered hundreds of square miles of seafloor. The team found dozens of shipwrecks, some dating back centuries, but none matched the description of the revolutionary warship they were seeking. They discovered Spanish cannons that might have come from Armada ships, pieces of Tudor-era pottery, and even what appeared to be bronze fittings from a large vessel. But the main prize continued to elude them. Dr. Rebecca Sheen arrived on the scene in the early 1990s, bringing with her a fresh perspective and cutting-edge technology. As a marine archaeologist specializing in naval history, she had become fascinated with the Sovereign after discovering references to its advanced design in forgotten Admiralty records stored in dusty London archives. These documents suggested that the ship's innovations were far ahead of their time, possibly influencing naval design for centuries after its loss. Chun's research revealed something that previous searchers had missed. The historical accounts of the battle had been written by survivors who were fighting for their lives and might not have accurately recorded the exact location where the Sovereign sank. She spent months analyzing wind patterns, tide charts, and ocean currents from 1588, trying to determine where a sinking ship would actually end up, not where witnesses thought they saw it go down. Using computer modeling and advanced sonar equipment, Chun identified several promising search areas that previous expeditions had overlooked. Her team included expert divers, underwater photographers, and specialists in historical shipwreck identification. They worked with a dedication that bordered on obsession, diving in all weather conditions and exploring every unusual sonar contact. The search in the 1990s was the most thorough yet attempted. Chin's team used side-scan sonar to map the entire seafloor in their target areas, creating detailed images of underwater terrain that revealed features invisible to earlier searchers. They found evidence of what appeared to be a major naval battle, including cannonballs, ship fittings, and bronze artifacts, scattered across a wide area of the channel floor. One particularly exciting discovery was a bronze cannon bearing the Tudor Rose, clear evidence that they were in the right area. The cannon was magnificently preserved, its decorative details still sharp after 4 centuries underwater. Chin was certain they were close to finding the main wreck, but despite months of intensive searching, the Sovereign itself remained hidden. Funding problems eventually forced Chin to abandon her search in 1998. The cost of mounting deep-sea expeditions was enormous, and without concrete results, investors were reluctant to continue supporting the project. Chin's final report expressed confidence that the Sovereign was somewhere in the area they had been searching, but she admitted that finding it might require technology that didn't yet exist. The early 2000s brought new advances in underwater exploration. Remote-operated vehicles could now dive deeper and stay underwater longer than human divers. GPS systems allowed for precise navigation, while improved sonar could detect objects buried under layers of sand and sediment. Several amateur treasure hunting groups announced plans to search for the Sovereign, but none had the resources or expertise to mount a serious expedition. Maritime museums around the world began offering rewards for information leading to the discovery of significant historical shipwrecks. The Sovereign was high on every list, described as one of the most important lost vessels in naval history. Documentary filmmakers produced television shows about famous shipwrecks, and the lost English warship featured prominently in several episodes. As the years passed, the search for HMS Sovereign became part of maritime folklore. Diving magazines published articles about the legendary warship, while internet forums buzzed with theories about where it might be located. Some researchers suggested that the ship had been completely destroyed by the explosion and would never be found intact. Others believed it was buried so deep under centuries of sediment that no search team would ever locate it. The legend of the lost warship that changed history was about to enter a new chapter, though no one could have predicted how the discovery would finally happen or what incredible secrets the Sovereign had been hiding on the ocean floor for more than 4 centuries. The morning of September 15, 2019, started like any other day for Captain James Morrison and his fishing crew aboard the trawler Northern Star. They had been working the same waters off the English coast for over 20 years, following the same routes their fathers and grandfathers had used before them. Morrison was a third-generation fisherman who knew these waters better than the streets of his hometown. But what happened that day would change everything he thought he knew about the channel floor. Young Danny, the newest member of the crew, was operating the fish finder when something unusual appeared on the sonar screen. Instead of the scattered dots that usually indicated schools of fish, the display showed a massive, solid object sitting on the seafloor. The shape was long and narrow, definitely not a natural rock formation. Morrison had seen plenty of modern shipwrecks on his sonar over the years, but this looked different, older somehow. The crew gathered around the sonar display, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. The object was huge, easily the size of a large ship, but it was sitting in an area where no one remembered any recent sinkings. Morrison's first mate, Pete, who had been fishing these waters for 30 years, scratched his gray beard thoughtfully. He had never seen anything like this before, and that was saying something. Morrison made the decision to mark the coordinates carefully and report the discovery when they returned to port. Something told him this wasn't just another fishing boat or cargo ship that had gone down in a storm. The shape was too regular, too purposeful. It looked like a warship, but what would a warship be doing in this particular spot, and why had no one ever detected it before? Back at Portsmouth Harbor, Morrison's discovery quickly reached the ears of Dr. Rebecca Chun, now in her 60s but still passionate about maritime archaeology. When she heard about the sonar contact, her heart began racing. After decades of searching for HMS Sovereign, she had never stopped believing that the legendary warship was out there somewhere. The coordinates Morrison provided were in an area she had never thoroughly searched, a deep underwater canyon that earlier expeditions had overlooked. Chun immediately contacted her old colleague, Professor Williams from the Maritime Research Institute, and Dr. Hassan, a marine archaeologist from France who specialized in Tudor-era shipwrecks. Within days, they had assembled an international team of experts and secured funding for a proper investigation. The team included underwater photographers, historical researchers, and specialists in 16th-century naval construction. The research vessel Deep Explorer left Portsmouth 3 weeks later, loaded with the most advanced underwater exploration equipment money could buy. The ship carried remote-operated vehicles capable of diving to depths no human could reach, 3D mapping sonar that could create detailed images of underwater objects, and submersibles equipped with high-definition cameras and sample collection. Dr. Chun stood on the deck of the Deep Explorer as they approached the coordinates Morrison had provided. The fishing captain had joined the expedition as a guide, his local knowledge proving invaluable in navigating the tricky currents and underwater terrain of the area. Morrison pointed out landmarks on the distant coastline that he used for navigation, sharing secrets that had been passed down through generations of fishermen. The first sonar sweep confirmed Morrison's discovery. The object on the seafloor was enormous, clearly artificial, and appeared to be remarkably well preserved. But the team needed to see it with their own eyes to confirm what they all hoped but barely dared to believe. Dr. Hassan prepared the remote-operated vehicle while Chun and Professor Williams studied the sonar images. Comparing them to historical descriptions of HMS Sovereign, the ROV descended slowly through the murky water, its lights cutting through the darkness as it approached the seafloor. At first, all they could see was sand and scattered debris. Then, like a ghost materializing from the depths, the outline of a massive ship began to appear on their screens. The crew of the Deep Explorer fell silent as they realized they were looking at something truly extraordinary. The ship was sitting upright on the canyon floor, its 3 masts still standing tall like ancient monuments. The hull appeared to be intact, protected by the cold water and lack of oxygen at this depth. Most incredible of all, the vessel's gun ports were clearly visible, and through the openings they could see the unmistakable gleam of bronze cannons. This wasn't just any old shipwreck. This was exactly what they had been searching for. Dr. Chun wiped tears from her eyes as the ROV's cameras revealed detail after amazing detail. The ship's decorative carvings were still sharp and clear, the royal coat of arms visible on the stern. Bronze fittings gleamed like they had been polished yesterday, while the innovative hull design that had made the Sovereign so revolutionary was perfectly preserved for the world to see. The ROV carefully maneuvered around the wreck, documenting every angle and detail. The ship's innovative gunport design was clearly visible, showing how the English shipbuilders had solved problems that wouldn't be understood by other navies for decades. The bronze cannons, still positioned as if ready for battle, represented a level of metallurgy and engineering that historians had never fully appreciated, but the most exciting discovery came when the ROV investigated the ship's stern section. There, partially buried under centuries of sediment, was the captain's cabin. The wooden structure had been sealed so well that it appeared to be watertight even after 400 years underwater. Dr. Hassan guided the ROV's mechanical arm to carefully brush away sand and debris, revealing intricate carved details and what appeared to be intact windows. The team realized they had found something unprecedented in maritime archaeology. Most shipwrecks from this period were scattered debris fields, broken apart by centuries of storms and currents. But HMS Sovereign had apparently settled into the underwater canyon in such a way that it was protected from the worst effects of time and weather. The ship was a time capsule, preserving not just the vessel itself but potentially everything inside it. Professor Williams immediately contacted the British Museum and the Maritime Heritage Foundation, reporting the discovery of what might be the most important naval archaeological find in history. News of the discovery spread quickly through the archaeological community, with experts from around the world requesting permission to study the wreck. But the team on the Deep Explorer knew they had to be careful. This wasn't just a historical curiosity, it was a treasure trove of information about Tudor naval technology and design. Over the following days, the team conducted detailed scans of the entire wreck site. The 3D mapping sonar created incredibly detailed images that showed the ship's construction in ways that had never been possible before. They could see how the innovative hull design worked, how the gun ports were engineered, and how the entire vessel had been built using techniques that were clearly ahead of their time. The most tantalizing discovery came when they detected what appeared to be sealed chests and containers in the captain's cabin. These could contain documents, personal effects, and possibly even the ship's official papers. If Captain Whitmore's logs and charts had survived, they might contain tactical innovations and design secrets that had been lost when the Sovereign sank. As word of the discovery spread, the waters above the wreck site filled with research vessels, documentary crews, and government officials. The British Navy sent representatives to inspect their legendary ancestor, while historians from universities around the world clamored for access to what promised to be the archaeological discovery of the century. Dr. Chun stood on the deck of the Deep Explorer looking down at the water that had hidden the Sovereign for over 4 centuries. After decades of searching, of disappointments and near misses, she had finally found the lost warship that changed history. But as exciting as the discovery was, she knew the real work was just beginning. The secrets hidden in HMS Sovereign's sealed cabin were about to rewrite everything historians thought they knew about Tudor naval warfare. The recovery operation began 6 months after the discovery, with Dr. Chun leading an international team of the world's best underwater archaeologists. The pressure was enormous. Everyone knew they were about to uncover secrets that had been hidden for over 4 centuries, secrets that could completely change how historians understood naval warfare and ship design. But they also knew they had only one chance to do this right. The first major breakthrough came when specialist divers managed to carefully open Captain Whitmore's sealed cabin. Using precision tools and working in shifts due to the extreme depth, they slowly cut through the wooden barriers that had protected the cabin's contents for so long. When the first diver's light penetrated the darkness inside, what he saw took his breath away. The cabin was like stepping back in time. Captain Whitmore's personal belongings lay exactly where he had left them on that fateful day in 1588. His leather-bound logbooks sat on the desk, their pages somehow preserved by the sealed environment. Charts covered in hand-drawn notations hung on the walls, while nautical instruments that looked far more advanced than anything historians expected from that time period filled the shelves. Dr. Chun was the first researcher to examine the captain's personal journals after they were carefully brought to the surface. What she read made her hands shake with excitement. Whitmore had documented naval tactics and strategies that wouldn't be invented for another 200 years. His notes described battle formations, gunnery techniques, and ship maneuvering strategies that naval academies around the world still taught as revolutionary. Innovations from much later periods, the most shocking discovery was a set of detailed blueprints found in a waterproof chest beneath the captain's bunk. These weren't just plans for HMS Sovereign, but designs for an entire new generation of warships that incorporated features historians had never seen before. The blueprints showed hull shapes that would maximize speed and stability, gun placement that would provide maximum firepower, and rigging systems that would allow ships to sail faster and maneuver more effectively than anything else on the seas. Professor Williams, the naval historian who had joined Chun's team, spent weeks studying these blueprints with growing amazement. The design showed that Tudor English shipbuilders had solved engineering problems that plagued navies well into the 18th century. They had figured out how to build ships that were both fast and heavily armed, stable in rough seas yet nimble in battle. These innovations should have given England naval dominance for centuries, but perhaps the most incredible find was Captain Whitmore's tactical manual, a handwritten guide that detailed battle strategies of incredible sophistication. The manual described the exact tactics that Admiral Nelson would use at the Battle of Trafalgar over 200 years later. It outlined how to break enemy battle lines, how to coordinate multiple ships in complex maneuvers, and how to use superior gunnery to defeat larger fleets. These weren't just random ideas, they were detailed, tested strategies that had clearly been developed through years of experience and study. Dr. Hassan, the French archaeologist, made another startling discovery when he examined the ship's bronze cannons. These weapons weren't just better than other cannons of their time. They incorporated metallurgy techniques that wouldn't be rediscovered until the Industrial Revolution. The bronze alloy used in their construction was stronger and more durable than anything historians thought possible in the 16th century. The cannons could fire heavier shot farther and more accurately than any weapon of their era. The artifacts recovered from HMS Sovereign forced museums around the world to completely rethink their exhibitions about naval history. The National Maritime Museum in London created an entirely new wing dedicated to the discoveries, while the Smithsonian in Washington requested permission to display some of the artifacts. Maritime academies began updating their textbooks to include the revolutionary techniques found in Captain Whitmore's journals, but the implications went far beyond museums and history books. Military historians realized that the loss of HMS Sovereign had created a massive gap in naval knowledge that had set back maritime development by generations. If the ship's innovations had survived and been incorporated into other vessels, the history of naval warfare could have been completely different. England might have achieved naval supremacy centuries earlier, changing the course of global exploration, trade, and colonization. Dr. Chun found herself at the center of a historical revolution as scholars from around the world came to study the sovereign artifacts. The discovery proved that Tudor England was far more technologically advanced than anyone had imagined. The shipbuilders and naval theorists of the 16th century had solved problems that their successors struggled with for hundreds of years. The knowledge had been there, perfected and ready to transform naval warfare. But it died with the ship that carried it to the bottom of the channel. The bronze cannons alone revolutionized understanding of Tudor metallurgy. When tested in computer simulations, they proved capable of performance that matched weapons from much later periods. The secret alloy formula found in the ship's foundry notes showed that English metalworkers had achieved a level of sophistication that historians had attributed to much later technological developments. Captain Morrison, the fisherman whose sonar had first detected the wreck, found himself invited to maritime conferences around the world. His simple discovery had unlocked one of history's greatest maritime mysteries. He often joked that he had been looking for fish and found something much more valuable, but he understood the significance of what had been uncovered. The sovereign represented knowledge that had been lost for centuries, innovations that could have changed the world. The ship's navigational instruments told another incredible story. They were far more accurate and sophisticated than anything historians thought existed in 1588. Some incorporated principles that wouldn't be understood by mainstream navigation until the development of modern GPS systems. Captain Whitmore and his crew had been using techniques for determining position and plotting courses that were centuries ahead of their time. Perhaps most importantly, the discovery of HMS Sovereign changed how historians viewed the development of naval technology. Instead of seeing it as a gradual evolution over centuries, they now understood that there had been periods of incredible innovation followed by catastrophic losses of knowledge. The Sovereign represented one of those lost peaks of achievement, a ship that had incorporated ideas so advanced that when it sank, naval development was set back by generations. Dr. Chun, now recognized as one of the world's leading maritime archaeologists, established the Sovereign Research Foundation to continue studying the ship and its artifacts. The foundation brought together experts from dozens of countries to analyze every aspect of the discovery and share their findings with the global academic community. The work would take decades, but each new analysis revealed more evidence of the incredible sophistication of Tudor naval technology. The recovery and study of HMS Sovereign proved that history is full of lost innovations and forgotten knowledge. The ship that had seemed so advanced when it was built in 1588 was even more remarkable than its builders could have imagined. Its revolutionary design, advanced weapons, and sophisticated tactics represented a level of naval development that wouldn't be matched for centuries after its loss. Today, Sovereign rests in a specially constructed facility where researchers continue to study its secrets. The ship that was meant to defend England against the Spanish Armada had ended up defending something even more valuable, the preservation of knowledge that would otherwise have been lost forever. Captain Whitmore's innovative warship had indeed changed history, just not in the way anyone had expected when it first sailed from Portsmouth Harbor over 4 centuries ago.